In 1971, John Madden was entering his second season as the head coach of the Oakland Raiders. After winning the AFL championship in 1967 and appearing in the Super Bowl, the Raiders had experienced the heartache of making it to the AFL title game 2 years in a row and then to the AFC championship game the next year. All four times they had fallen just short, and each time their final loss had come at the hands of the eventual world champions. The Raiders had already established themselves as a good team, and they had maintained that consistency. But the large question was still hanging out there. Could they finally win a championship? All these questions and more will be delved into in this episode of the T3 Raider Roots podcast as we revisit the year 1971. I'm your host, T3 Raider Facts, and I want to thank you for joining me today. So let's get started. This would mark the first time in 5 years that the Oakland Raiders would not be involved in a conference championship game. Disaster struck the team in the form of the injury bug. Star running back Hewitt Dixon and deep threat Warren Wells were both gone for the year, and running back Charlie Smith would miss the first 6 games. Yet despite losing these key players, the Silver and Black remain feared championship contenders because of a well-run organization, great field leadership by their head coach, and a spirit of unity as well as personality. They worked hard, they played hard, they drank it all in the end, they left it all on the field, matching their winning record from the year before. In the draft, the Raiders went heavy on the defensive side of the ball. They picked up hard-hitting safety Jack Tatum out of Ohio State in round 1 and linebacker Phil Villapiano of Bowling Green in round 2. Both would be starters, as would be fourth-round pick running back Clarence Davis out of USC. Tight end Bob Moore was added in the 5th round, and defensive end Horace Jones was brought in during round 12. He also became a starter. On the offensive line, third-year man George Beeler moved into the right guard spot next to another newcomer, tackle Bob Brown, who had come in via a trade with the Rams. Bob Boomer Brown instantly made his presence known and felt. Brown showed up on the first day of training camp in a Cadillac with his own driver and a suitcase full of pistols. He often missed curfew, but had a unique way of dealing with it. I didn't have to sneak out, he said. I'd leave at 10 at night and just leave a blank check signed on my bed, and if they came in and fined me, they could just fill out the check. Imagine the team's reaction to his arrival in a Cadillac and toting a suitcase full of pistols. Brown once shot out the television in his room, and another time he shot up the mattress of teammate Willie Brown's bed while Willie was still in it. It should be noted that he was not actually trying to shoot his roommate and teammate, just shake him up a little. John Madden even noted that Boomer brought his technique and style to the team, and that's what he taught our guys. They were tough anyway, but from Bob, they learned that even in relatively passive situations, they could be aggressive. Pretty soon, everyone's playing that way, although maybe not with a gun. Boomer, or El Boomo, as he was called by some, was just one of a cast of many characters that showed up in Santa Rosa to prepare for the 1971 season. But the man who's running the show, John Madden, now in his 3rd year as head coach, was doing it in a laid-back way which acknowledged the intelligence levels of his players, but also demanded performance. During a particular chalkboard talk before a game, some of the players who had never been with the Raiders noticed that 4 or 5 players got up during the meeting, walked out of the room, and caught a cab to the stadium. But Madden didn't mind. He knew that they knew what they needed to know. And that's not something you can teach or coach. It was just something that Madden had a good sense for. If he pushed for more than he did, or been a lot more uptight, perhaps this group would not have done nearly as well as it did. Ken Stabler commented that one nickname they had for their coach was Pinky, but another nickname they had for Madden was Fox because he was so smart. He might come in during a meeting, turn over a chair, raise hell, walk out, come back in, and wink, like it was no big deal. That was just his style. When the Raiders took the field on opening day, they were faced by a rookie quarterback in Boston, Heisman Trophy winner Jim Plunkett, who helped to christen brand new Schaefer Stadium. The Raiders boasted 4 rookie starters of their own: safety Jack Tatum out of Ohio State, who had faced Plunkett during the previous Rose Bowl game, halfback Clarence Davis from just down the road at the University of Southern California, and defenders Phil Villapiano and Horace Jones. Pete Banaszak scored the Raiders' opening touchdown, but a botched snap on the extra point try left the team stuck at 6 points. and that is all they would get on this day. Plunkett passed the Patriots to a 20-6 upset win over Oakland. It would be the last time the Raiders would lose for the next 9 weeks. In week 2, the Raiders faced the second of 4 consecutive road games and opponents. This one, the division rival San Diego Chargers. George Blanda kicked 2 field goals and also 4 extra points on Raider touchdowns, 2 by Fred Biletnikoff, as the Silver and Black intercepted Charger quarterback John Hadle 5 times, and the Raiders cruised to a 34-0 victory, their first shutout ever over San Diego. The next game was a Monday night affair in Cleveland. A national TV audience saw the home team jump out to a 14-0 lead, but then they saw the Raiders come storming back and take charge of the game, defeating the Browns 34-20 on the strength of Pete Manizak's running and the receiving of tight end Raymond Chester. Even though the injuries continued to pile up for the Raiders, their commitment to excellence did not take a back seat. Now it was on to Denver to face another division rival, the Broncos. Denver hadn't won a game yet, and even though they jumped to a 9-3 lead on the strength of 3 Jim Turner field goals, the Raiders brought in fourth-year man Ken Stabler to work the offense. He threw for a touchdown and ran for 1 more score. Defensive back Jimmy Warren ran back an interception 55 yards for another score, as the Raiders dominated the game and served notice to the rest of their division as well as the league that they weren't going anywhere other than the win column. Finally, 5 weeks into the season, the Silver and Black returned home to Alameda. The sellout Coliseum crowd saw the visiting Philadelphia Eagles jump out to a 10-0 lead, which they took into the locker room at halftime. But when the teams returned to the field for the second half, it was a different story. LaMonica hit Fred Biletnikoff on a scoring toss of 35 yards. Then the ground game of Oakland took effect, and Hubbard and Banaszak helped the Raiders plow their way down the field, resulting in a Banaszak score. LaMonica threw a 27-yard touchdown pass to Eldridge Dickey, and then on the ensuing kickoff, George Atkinson scooped up a fumble and returned it for a touchdown. It wasn't exactly Heidi, but it was 2 touchdowns in 15 seconds. And the Raiders scored the last 34 points of the game, blowing out the Eagles and thrilling the home fans. Staying at home the next week, the Raiders took on Cincinnati, who had proven to be a consistently tough opponent for the Silver and Black. The Raiders jumped out to a 17-0 lead on the strength of Hubbard's running and LaMonica's passing. But these Bengals tied the score at 17, tied it again at 24, and then pushed into the lead at 27-24 with time running out. It was here that Clarence Davis and Marv Hubbard put the team on their collective backs and marched the Raiders down the field, with Hubbard scoring the late touchdown, securing the come-from-behind victory, putting the Raiders' record at 5-1. At home for the 3rd game in a row, it was Chiefs week, and the rival Kansas City team came to town. The Chiefs led for most of the game, but this wasn't just a game. This was all-out war. The Raiders battled back, scored a touchdown to cut the lead to 2017, then drove down the field again furiously as time was running out, and George Blanda kicked a short field goal to tie the score in the end. With the comeback 20-20 tie, not only did it preserve the Raiders' 6-game unbeaten streak, but it made George Blanda Pro Football's all-time leading scorer. The next week finished on an odd note in New Orleans, the home of jazz. The Saints had 2 turnovers and the Raiders had 2. But after jumping out to a 14-0 lead, the Silver and Black let their opponents back in the game. What proved to be the main weapon used against the Raiders was themselves, as they netted over 100 yards and penalties, which paved the way for the home team to score a touchdown late, resulting in a tie score of 21-21. Even though they still hadn't lost in 7 weeks, 2 consecutive ties had a weird feel to it, and the Raiders' record was now 5-1-2. The Houston Oilers then came to Oakland, and the Oilers paid dearly for the Raiders' frustration at having tied twice in a row. A Nehemiah Wilson interception set up a 63-yard scoring strike for Louis. The Raiders stormed to a 41-0 lead before Oiler rookie quarterback Masterini scored a touchdown and threw 2 late touchdown passes, all of which proved to be insignificant. The 8th consecutive Raiders game without a defeat was a blowout that delighted the home crowd. When the division rival San Diego Chargers came to town the following week, they were determined to give the Raiders a little payback for the 34-0 shellacking they had suffered earlier in the season. Things looked bleak for the Raiders as they fell behind 24-10, But unlike many teams, this Raiders team proved to be most dangerous when they fell behind. Sure enough, they struck back for 24 consecutive points, blowing away the Charger lead and their chance at revenge. The Chargers scored to cut the lead to 34-30, driving again when a Dan Connors clutch interception ended the San Diego attack just a few yards away from the Raiders' end zone. John Madden then ordered Jerry DePoyster to take a safety in the end zone, running out the clock and preserving a 9-game unbeaten streak for the Silver and Black. The team's record now stood at 7-1-2. More importantly, they were unbeaten against all their division rivals. Then the Raiders made a trip east to Baltimore, to that all too familiar and all too painful dirt field, and the site of their miserable loss to the Colts the previous year's AFC Championship game. Whether it was the fact that injuries had finally caught up to the Raiders, or that perhaps this was their letdown week, or maybe it was the long trip to the East Coast, whatever the reason, the Colts jumped out to a 30-0 lead by the third quarter and eased to a 37-14 victory. The Colts had proven that they were better than the Raiders in their first meeting, and they did it again this day. In actuality, the Raiders registered about the same amount of total offense that Baltimore did. However, 6 interceptions will do you in almost every time. And this was the story of the game for the Silver and Black. So now, sitting precariously at 7-2-2, they made a trip south to Atlanta for their first ever meeting against the Falcons. A muddy field and a slippery ball resulted in 2 critical Oakland fumbles, one of which was returned 60 yards for a touchdown. And the Raiders trailed the entire game, losing to Atlanta 24-13, their second defeat in a row after having experienced such a terrific start to the season. And so the 1971 season came down to a battle between the Chiefs and the Raiders in Arrowhead Stadium. The Western Division was once again at stake. These games were always a war, and they always took their toll on both sides. This game was to be no different. The Chiefs jumped out to a 10-0 lead. The Raiders then closed the gap with a touchdown, and then Kansas City notched a field goal with just 1 second left in the first half to extend their lead to 13-7. The Raiders continued to battle back, and early in the fourth quarter, Marv Hubbard plowed over the goal line, giving Oakland its first lead of the day. All they had to do was hold on. George Atkinson's interception of a Lynn Dawson pass halted a Kansas City rally. But then when George Blanda attempted a field goal that would stretch the lead to 4 points, the kick was blocked. The Chiefs got the ball back, and Dawson threw a slant pass to Otis Taylor. Nehemiah Wilson undercut and intercepted the pass at the Kansas City 17. This would have almost certainly secured the game, but the catch was ruled as a trap and disallowed. The Chiefs still had one more chance. Dawson then hit Otis Taylor for a critical completion. He then launched one over Taylor's head, an uncatchable pass, but pass interference was called on the Raiders, setting up a Jan Stenerud field goal. He made the kick, the Chiefs won the game, and the Raiders' streak of 4 consecutive Western Division titles had come to an end. All that was left of the season was one final game, at home against the Broncos. Before the game, 12-year pro Jim Otto was voted by the team as the Gorman Award recipient, given to the most inspirational player as voted on by his teammates. The Raiders were back home, and they may have lost the title, but they had not lost their pride. Pete Banaszak got his 8th rushing touchdown of the year, a team record. Darryl LaMonica, playing with a hand that would require off-season surgery, threw a touchdown pass to Raymond Chester. And the spirited Oakland defense stood tall on a goal line stand that gave the home fans one last proud moment for the season. With the 21-13 win, the Raiders finished the season at 8-4-2, the exact same record as the previous year, but not good enough to win the division, and not good in 1972, a year in which they planned to reclaim the Western Division title and continue their quest for that Super Bowl that was so close so many times. For this episode, I would like to thank Mike Ciani and Christine Setting Clark, Murray Olderman, Mark Grabowski, Jim Otto, and NFL Films. Make sure to visit my YouTube channel, T3 Sports Guy, and subscribe so you can catch up on all the Raiders history year by year. You can also check me out on the Only Nation podcast as we continue to follow the Silver and Black. Our next stop on this Raiders journey will be the year 1972. Until then, thank you so much for joining me, and I want to remind you that passion always outlives fashion. Here's wishing you a bright silver moon, shining in the dark black night. Take care, everyone, and go Raiders.